Hello, dear listener. I'm glad you're here. Let your shoulders drop a little, unclench your jaw, and give yourself permission to stop carrying the day for a while. There's nothing you need to fix right now, nothing you need to rush toward. Just settle in, get comfortable, and let a simple evening unfold at its own gentle pace, like a quiet kitchen light glowing while the wind wanders outside. I hope this story gives you a soft place to rest your thoughts, and that by the time it ends, you'll feel warm, safe, and ready for sleep. The road back is narrower than he remembers, or maybe the fields have simply grown taller with time, leaning in as if they've been waiting for him. Autumn has been busy here. The trees along the ditches were their last gold and copper leaves, and the air tastes faintly of damp earth and distant smoke. The wind moves in gusts that don't feel harsh so much as insistent, like a knuckle tapping a door and then retreating, tapping again. He drives slowly, not because he's unsure, but because he doesn't want to arrive too fast. Each bend pulls an old memory forward, something about bicycle tires on gravel, the squeak of a gate, the way evening used to arrive early in the countryside, hurrying everyone indoors. When the house appears, it does not look like a place that has been waiting dramatically. It looks like it has simply kept being itself. The roofline is the same, a little uneven the way old roofs are, and the windows reflect the pale sky. There's a yard with sleeping grass and a few stubborn plants clinging to their last green. A bare apple tree stands close to the kitchen side of the house, branches lifted like thin arms, as if shrugging at the season. He parks near the fence, and for a moment, he just sits with his hands on the steering wheel, breathing. The engine ticks softly as it cools, and the sound feels like a small clock settling down. The front door gives a familiar complaint when he opens it, a creak that seems to recognize him. The air inside is cool, carrying the faint, dry smell of wood and old plaster, and underneath it, a softer trace of something domestic, like linen that has been stored away, but never forgotten the shape of a body. He steps in and closes the door, and the house becomes a quieter world at once. Outside, the wind continues, but now it's muffled, turned into a distant voice. He switches on the hallway light. It flickers once, then steadies, casting a warm circle onto the worn runner rug. He does not head straight to the even though the day has been long and his eyes already feel heavy. His feet, guided by habit older than thought, take him toward the kitchen. The kitchen door opens easily, and the room greets him with its plain, honest shapes. The table by the window, the familiar chairs with their scuffed legs, the cupboard that never fully closes unless you lift it a little, the stove and oven with their solid, dependable face. On the windowsill, there are small marks where flower pots once sat, pale rings like ghosts of summers. The curtains hang in quiet folds, their fabric a little thicker than modern curtains, slightly rougher to the touch, as if woven to last rather than to impress. He puts his bag down by the wall and stands still for a few breaths, letting the room settle around him. This kitchen has seen ordinary evenings and important ones too. It has held laughter that spilled like water and silence that sat like a cat. It has heard the clink of spoons, the hush of someone washing dishes late at night, the low murmur of weather reports on an old radio. He feels, oddly, as if he is not returning to a place so much as returning to a pace. Here, time moves with purpose, but not with hurry. The first thing he does is turn on the kettle. The switch clicks, and the kettle begins to murmur, a small mechanical promise of warmth. He rinses a teapot at the sink, watching the water bead and run over the glazed ceramic. The sink is cold beneath his fingers. The tap squeals slightly when he turns it, as it always did. He finds tea in the cupboard, simple black tea in a tin that smells faintly of bergamot, even though it isn't labeled as such. When he opens it, the dry leaves give off that comforting scent. Sharp at first, then deeper, like old paper and summer hay pressed together. While the kettle heats, he moves around the kitchen as if following a gentle choreography. He opens a drawer and finds a familiar knife with a wooden handle, the kind that has been sharpened so many times it looks slimmer than it should. He locates a cutting board, its surface worn into shallow valleys from years of slicing. He sets them on the table near the window. Outside, the wind tosses the branches of the apple tree, and a few leaves race along the ground like small animals. The glass is cool and slightly fogged at the edges, and when he breathes near it, it clouds softly, then clears again. He pulls a chair out and sits for a moment, listening. The kettle's growing hum fills the room the way a purring cat fills silence, not demanding attention, but making everything feel less empty. Somewhere in the house, a pipe ticks. The floorboards answer his shifting weight with a quiet creak. He thinks of other evenings, smaller versions of this one, when he had come in from the cold and stood exactly here, hands held out near the stove, waiting for feeling to return to his fingertips. The memory doesn't sting. It doesn't tug. It simply warms, like a cup cradled between both hands. When the kettle reaches its boil, it clicks off with a decisive sound. He pours the water into the teapot, and steam rises, blooming in the air and briefly softening the edges of everything. The tea begins its slow transformation, turning the water from clear to amber, then to a darker, comforting brown. He sets a mug on the table, one of the old ones with a slightly uneven rim. He runs his thumb along the edge and smiles without realizing it. This is the mug that always felt right, heavy enough to be reassuring, plain enough to be honest. Now that the tea is steeping, he turns his attention to the apples. There's a small basket on the counter, and inside, as if the house has been quietly prepared for him, sit a few apples, red gold and speckled, their skins dulled by the season, their scent faint but real. He lifts one and brings it to his nose. It smells like fruit and cold air, like something that grew slowly, paying attention to sunlight and rain. He carries the apples to the table and begins to slice. The knife moves through the first apple with a gentle crunch. The sound is bright, clean, and surprisingly loud in the quiet kitchen. Pale flesh is revealed, a little grainy and fresh. He slices carefully, not rushing, letting each piece fall into a bowl. The scent of apple rises, delicate at first, then more confident. He remembers hands, older hands doing this same task, the same rhythm. Slice, turn, slice. The blade tapping the board lightly at the end of each motion. There is comfort in repetition. There is rest in doing something with a clear beginning and end. He decides on a simple pie, the kind that doesn't require ceremony. Flour, butter, a little sugar, apples, cinnamon. The cupboard yields what he needs as if it remembers the recipe. He finds a bag of flour and measures it without fuss, feeling the soft powder on his fingertips. He pinches salt between his fingers and lets it fall like fine sand. Butter comes from the fridge, cold and pale, and when he cuts it into cubes, the knife leaves clean edges that look almost too neat. He works it into the flour with patient hands until the mixture becomes crumbly, like damp beach sand, ready to be packed into a shape. The dough comes together slowly, refusing to be hurried, and he respects that. He adds a splash of water and gathers it gently, folding rather than kneading, letting it become a cohesive ball. It feels cool, alive in a quiet way, responsive. He wraps it in a cloth and sets it aside to rest. The cloth smells faintly of laundry soap and old cupboards, and the scent makes the kitchen feel even more real, more inhabited by care. He sprinkles cinnamon over the sliced apples, and the fragrance blooms at once, warm, sweet, and unmistakably autumn. It fills the air in a way that seems to soften the wind's voice outside. He adds a spoonful of sugar and a small pinch of salt, then tosses the apples gently until they glisten. Cinnamon clings to the fruit in rusty brown dust, collecting in the bowl's curve. He pauses with his hands hovering over the apples, breathing in. There are smells that don't just reach the nose, they reach behind the eyes, behind the ribs, into a place where the body keeps its oldest comforts. Cinnamon is one of those smells. It says, someone is home. Something good is coming. You can wait. He turns on the oven. It answers with a low, steady sound, a breath that deepens as it warms. Soon, the kitchen begins to change temperature in subtle waves. The air nearest the oven grows softer, less sharp. He holds his palms out toward the warming door, not because he has to, but because it feels right to acknowledge that kind of heat, that reliable, unshowy generosity. The oven's warmth is different from a radiator's. It has a faint scent of metal and past meals clean, but seasoned, as if it has absorbed years of dinners and desserts, and is now offering that memory back as a quiet spice. While the oven heats, he sets out dishes as if expecting company, though he knows he will eat alone. He takes plates from the cupboard, simple white ones with a few tiny chips along the edges. He sets forks beside them, the metal dulled from use. He places a small bowl of sugar on the table and a jar of honey that has crystallized slightly, turning opaque and thick. He lays out a cloth napkin, folded into a tidy rectangle. It seems like an unnecessary detail, but he has learned that small acts of care change the feeling of a room. They make the evening feel chosen, not merely endured. The curtains move slightly when the wind presses against the window, the fabric lifting and settling. He touches them with the back of his fingers. They are coarse in a way that feels comforting, woven with a sturdiness that suggests hands at a loom, or at least a mind that valued durability. The pattern is small and faded. Maybe once it was blue, now more like a soft gray with hints of color where the light catches. He remembers these curtains in daylight, lit from behind, turning the sun into a muted glow. Tonight, with darkness gathering outside, they feel like a boundary between him and the wild weather, a domestic shield made of thread. He rolls out the dough on the table, dusting the surface with flour. The rolling pin is old wood, smooth from palms. The dough stretches slowly, obedient, but not weak. He lifts it carefully and lays it into a pie dish, pressing it into the curve with gentle fingertips. The edges are uneven, charmingly so, and he doesn't correct them too much. This is not a bakery pie, it is a kitchen pie. It should look like it belongs to a real evening, not a photograph. He pours the apples into the crust, and they mound in the center like a small hill. He adds a few thin slices of butter over the top, then sprinkles a final, generous dusting of cinnamon. For a moment, the kitchen smells like spice markets and holidays, like warmth made visible. He covers the pie with a simple top crust, not bothering with intricate lattice. He cuts a few slits to let the steam escape, then pinches the edges together, sealing apples inside dough the way you tuck something precious under a blanket. When he slides the pie into the oven, a wave of heat brushes his face. He closes the door and listens to the faint, reassuring hum. Baking is a patient kind of magic. You do your part, you arrange the ingredients with care, and then you wait. The waiting is not empty. It is filled with scent slowly blooming, with warmth building, with time passing in a way that feels safe. He pours the tea into his mug and carries it to the table. The tea is deep amber now, and when he lifts it to his lips, the steam fogs his glasses for a moment if he's wearing them, or simply warms his face. The first sip is slightly bitter, grounding, and he adds a small spoon of honey. The honey dissolves slowly, leaving a faint floral sweetness. He takes another sip and lets it travel down into his chest, where it seems to loosen something that has been held tight all day. Outside, the wind grows bolder. It rattles something, maybe a loose shutter, maybe a branch tapping the wall. The sound might have been unsettling in another place, but here it is simply part of the evening, like the kettle's earlier song. He watches the darkness thicken beyond the window. The yard has become a soft blur. The apple tree's branches sway black lines against a dim sky. The kitchen, by contrast, is a small island of light, and he feels an old gratitude for walls and windows and warmth. As he waits, he washes a few dishes in the sink, not because they need washing, but because the motion soothes him. Water runs hot now, warmed by the house's slow waking. He holds his hands under the stream and enjoys the stingless heat. Soap smells clean and simple. He scrubs a plate and watches the water carry away imaginary crumbs. The act is rhythmic: rinse, soap, rinse, set aside. Each finished plate feels like a small, completed thought, something put in order. He dries his hands on a towel and pauses, listening again. The house has a different voice at night. It creaks and sighs as it adjusts to temperature changes. It settles as if it has finally accepted his presence and is relaxing in response. He thinks of the years he spent away, the rooms he lived in that were too quiet or too loud, the kitchens that felt temporary. Even good places can feel thin if you don't have roots in them. Here, everything feels thick with history, not dramatic history, just the accumulation of ordinary days, meals cooked, tea poured, windows wiped, curtains drawn. He sits again at the table and lets his gaze drift over the familiar objects. A small jar of cloves sits forgotten near the spice rack. A chipped bowl holds a few walnuts. A candle, half used, waits on a saucer. None of it is special, and that is precisely what makes it soothing. His mind, which has spent so much time bracing for problems, begins to unclasp. Thoughts still pass through, but they pass like clouds, not like storms. The smell of baking begins to rise. At first, it is faint, warm flour, melting butter. Then it becomes more distinct. Apples softening, sugar caramelizing at the edges, cinnamon deepening into something almost honeyed. The scent slides into the corners of the kitchen and seems to settle into the curtains, the wood, the very air. It is the kind of smell that makes a person feel cared for, even if they are the one doing the caring. He stands and walks closer to the oven, bending slightly to look through the glass window. Inside, the pie is turning golden. The crust lifts in small places where steam pushes upward. The filling bubbles quietly, sending up little bursts of fragrant vapor. He watches it as if watching a small fire, mesmerized by the steady transformation. He remembers being a child and pressing his face too close to the oven door, leaving a faint fog on the glass, then being gently shooed away. He smiles at the memory, not sharply, but softly, like a candle burning steady. He lowers the oven temperature slightly and sets a timer, though he doesn't truly need it. He has baked enough pies in his life to feel when the time is right. Still, the timer's presence is comforting, a simple promise that nothing will be forgot. He returns to the table, tea in hand, and pulls the curtain back a little with 2 fingers. The glass is cold where it has not been warmed by the room, and the contrast feels clean and awake. The wind pushes against the world outside with invisible shoulders. Leaves skitter across the yard, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barks once, then falls silent. A branch taps the roof gently, like someone knocking with patience. The night is not threatening. It is simply alive. He watches it and feels, strangely, a kinship. The wind is doing what wind does. The house is doing what a house does. He is doing what he does, returning, tending, warming, making something simple and good. When the timer rings, it is a small, sharp sound that seems too loud for such a quiet evening. He stands, turns it off, and opens the oven. Heat rolls out in a wave, rich with scent. He slides the pie out carefully, holding it steady with both hands. The crust is a deep golden brown with darker freckles at the edges. The filling has bubbled up through one of the slits, leaving a glossy streak that catches the light. It looks imperfect in a way that suggests it will taste exactly right. He sets the pie on the counter to cool. The cooling is important, he knows. Cut too soon and the filling will run weight, and it will settle into a soft, sliceable tenderness. The pie crackles faintly as it releases steam, a delicate sound like paper gently crumpling. He inhales again, letting cinnamon and apple and butter fill him. It is amazing, he thinks, how quickly a kitchen can become a refuge. You don't need anything complicated. You need warmth, a little light, and a small ritual you trust. While the pie rests, he adds a log to the small stove if there is one, or he simply turns turns on a nearby heater. The room grows even more cozy. He notices how the oven's warmth has changed the feel of the curtains, making them seem softer, less stiff. He runs his fingers along the fabric again, feeling the weave. The curtain is not just a thing that hangs. It is part of the room's comfort, holding the window like a gentle hand, making the darkness outside feel less close. He brings out a small dish and places it on the table, then a knife for cutting pie. He sets a spoon nearby in case he wants to scoop a bit of filling from the pan. He adds a small bowl of cream if there is cream, or perhaps just a pat of butter to melt on top, the way some people like it. He doesn't hurry. The waiting becomes part of the pleasure. He takes slow sips of tea and listens to the house breathe. As the pie cools, he notices other small details that he had forgotten. The way the light from the ceiling fixture is slightly yellow, making everything look more forgiving. The faint scratch marks on the table where someone once wrote a note without a pad beneath, the little dent in the cupboard door where it must have been bumped years ago. These marks of use feel like proof of life. The kitchen does not pretend to be untouched. It says, "People have been here, doing their best, loving in ordinary ways." At last, he cuts into the pie. The knife presses through the crust with a soft crack, then slides into warm apples. Steam rises as the slice separates, carrying the full scent into the air again. The filling holds together, thickened and glossy, apples tender but not mushy. He transfers a slice to a plate, and the crust flakes slightly at the edge. He adds a small spoon of cream, watching it melt into the warm fruit, turning into pale ribbons. He sits down at the table and takes the first bite. The taste is simple and deeply satisfying. Buttery crust, sweet apples, cinnamon's warm shadow, a faint tang from the fruit that keeps it from becoming too sweet. The texture is soft and comforting. It tastes like autumn evening itself, like coming in from cold air and letting warmth return to your cheeks. He chews slowly, deliberately, giving his body time to register that it is being fed, not just filled. Outside, the wind continues its restless wandering, but it no longer feels like something that could reach him. The kitchen holds him. The pie holds the evening together like a small anchor. He eats without distractions, no phone, no rushing, just the sound of fork against plate, the occasional creak of the chair. The tea sits nearby, and he alternates bites with sips, the bitterness of tea balancing the sweetness of the pie. Between bites, he looks around the kitchen again, and he realizes something gently surprising. He is not only remembering this place, he is adding to it. This evening is becoming part of the kitchen's quiet history. The smell of cinnamon will linger until morning. A few crumbs will remain until he wipes them away. The warmth in the room will soak into the wood and fabric for a while. The house will remember, in its own silent way, that someone came back and made something good. He finishes his slice and sits for a moment with his hands around the mug, letting the warmth seep into his fingers. There is a specific kind of tiredness that feels safe, the tiredness that comes after you've done something gentle and complete. His eyelids feel heavier now, not from stress, but from comfort. The day outside the house feels far away, as if it belongs to another person. Here, the only tasks are small, manageable ones. Clear the plate, cover the pie, rinse the mug. He stands and moves slowly, like someone walking through warm water. He covers the pie with a cloth to keep it fresh, the fabric settling over the dish like a soft cap. He rinses the plate and fork and sets them on the rack. The water is still warm, and he lingers with his hands under it for a second longer than necessary, enjoying the simple sensation. Then he turns off the tap and listens to the last drops fall, spaced out, unhurried. Before leaving the kitchen, he turns off the overhead light and leaves a smaller lamp on, a gentler glow. The room looks even more tender this way. Shadows soften the corners. The curtains become a darker, thicker presence against the window. The oven, cooling now, clicks faintly as it releases heat. He stands at the doorway and looks back, taking in the quiet tableau. Table set, mug half empty, pie covered and resting. The air still scented with cinnamon. He feels warmth in his chest that has nothing to do with tea or oven heat. It is the warmth of returning and being welcomed, even if the welcome comes from objects and smells and memory rather than from voices. He understands, in a calm, bodily way, that he can take care of himself here, that he can rest, that he can be ordinary and safe and unobserved. He walks down the hall, each step slow and soft. Behind him, the kitchen remains, holding its gentle light and its lingering fragrance. Outside, the wind continues to move through the trees and across the yard, but it feels less like a force and more like a lullaby, nature's own restless song, heard faintly through walls and curtains. He reaches the bedroom, but even as he settles in, part of him stays in the kitchen, in that small circle of warmth where tea steeped and apples were sliced, and a simple pie rose into something comforting. As he lies down, he imagines the kitchen in the dark, quiet now, like a faithful friend waiting without impatience. He imagines waking tomorrow and tasting the leftover pie with morning tea. He imagines the curtains glowing again in daylight, the wind perhaps calmer, the apple tree standing in the yard with its patient branches. His breathing slows. The thoughts that usually crowd him begin to thin, spacing out like the last drops from the faucet. The warmth of cinnamon and baked apples seems to remain in the air of his mind, a soft scent that says, "You are home enough for tonight," and the night, with all its wind and darkness, stays outside where it belongs, while inside, the house keeps its quiet watch, and sleep arrives the way a familiar blanket does, gradually, gently, with no need to fight it.